Hello and welcome. You're watching UATV News with me, Ksenia Buhai. First, this hour on October 25th, the election day, an all-Ukrainian opinion poll is going to take place at the voting stations. President's office states it's not a referendum. Ukrainians would only be asked 5 questions. Addressing the nation, President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky said the state is going to ask straight questions and hopes to get straight answers directly from citizens.
25 жовтня.
On October the 25th, at the polling station, I will ask you 5 important questions about what we discuss in the streets, in kitchens and online, about things we discuss with friends, parents or taxi drivers. These will be questions that have never been asked before, just 5 important questions to know your opinion.
Adaptive quarantine to continue running in Ukraine until the end of the year. The Cabinet of Ministers decided to extend the anti-epidemic restrictions and introduce a number of amendments. Working hours of cafes and restaurants, regardless of the zone, will be again restricted until 10 p.m. Sports events now can be held, also with closed tribunes. The only exception, international matches provided by the special approval of the Ministry of Health. At the same time, the government does not plan to impose a strict lockdown.
We cannot afford any complete lockdowns. We need to live. We need the country's economy to live, and accordingly, people to receive wages. This is very important for us. That is why a list of restrictive measures is being introduced on the territory of Ukraine.
The Cabinet has also made changes to the learning process. It recommends a 2-week break for school children starting from October 15th. After the end of the epidemic vacation, students will shift to distant and blended forms of learning. Students of universities and vocational schools will study online. Aside from students from the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine and annexed Crimea, non-residents will have to leave their dormitory rooms for the period of the quarantine. The exception expands also for orphans, foreigners and residents of regions with a red level of epidemic danger. Victims of large-scale wildfires in Luhansk region receive aid from all over Ukraine. Volunteers are using the ice palace in the city of Severodonetsk as a storehouse to collect everything necessary for victims. People come to get warm clothes, food and tools to clear the ruins. See more in a story by our correspondents.
Zoya lived in Voronovo for 35 years. Her house got burned to the ground in half an hour as a result of wildfires. The woman sifts through the remains of the garage and cherishes hope to realize surviving bricks for at least a little money. This should be enough for the first time.
Firstly, we trimmed off the doors and traded them for scrap metal. Volunteers helped a lot. They brought food, garments and footwear.
Severodonetsk city dormitory was hastily turned into temporary housing for those who have nowhere to go. Vitaly and his wife are satisfied with the conditions. There is a kitchen and a shower room. He says many things could not be saved from the burning house, but he managed to pull his wife out of the fire timely.
I managed to get my wife out from the burning house. We were lucky. That's all we managed to get. Volunteers and Red Cross helped us.
Meanwhile, volunteers deployed mobile aid facility in the Severodonetsk Ice Palace. Here they store garments and food for victims.
They supply us with products. You have already seen it. They provide us with clothes. Besides, they give us bedding, pillows, blankets, everything like this. Towels too. All Ukrainian cities join campaign. Bakhmut, Kyiv, Irpin, Kharkiv helps very well.
Lydia came here not only for food. She took a shovel. She's going to clear the debris of her house. She says she also needs a wheelbarrow to make removing of remains of the walls easier.
It is necessary to rake it out. Everything is ruined by fire. Everyone's equipment also burned down. More than 100 houses were demolished by fire, and the sheds lay in ruins almost everywhere in the village. People, of course, pick up surviving tools. The cell remained almost unharmed. Just the roof, walls were concrete, and that's all, nothing more.
Wildfires destroyed more than 1,000 residential buildings. 11 people died, 19 were hospitalized. The state promises to provide compensation to the victims. More than $10,000 will be paid for a burnt house. Families that lost their kin in fire will acquire slightly more than $7,000. Owners of a partially destroyed house will receive almost $2,000. Zoya Filimonova relies on this assistance. She wants to build a new house in the same place, in Voronezh. In meantime, resides with her daughter in Severodonetsk.
If the state gives money, then of course I will buy something, because my daughter has her own family.
Reported by Nick Starkov for UATV News.
The self-proclaimed Nagorno-Karabakh is going to attract volunteers to participate in hostilities in the conflict zone. Meanwhile, Azerbaijan is ready to rebuild the destroyed houses on its liberated territories. More details in the following report.
To turn the territories of Nagorno-Karabakh occupied by Armenia into a paradise. The president of Azerbaijan has promised to rebuild the destroyed houses as a result of the strikes inflicted by the armed forces of Armenia. According to him, life will soon return to the region and the place will turn into a paradise.
We will build cities across the liberated lands and turn those areas into paradise. Those lands will reinvigorate. Life and children's laughter will return there. Citizens of Azerbaijan will live on those lands in dignity.
Azerbaijan accuses Armenia and the armed formations it supports on the territory of Nagorno-Karabakh of shelling three regions: Goranboy, Tartar and Agdam. Armenia declares that Azerbaijan continues firing missiles and artillery along the contact line and accuses Turkey of supporting Azerbaijan. Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan is confident that Turkey has its own interest in this conflict.
Turkey continues to be engaged in the hostilities in the fighting. Turkey and Syria recruited mercenaries and members of terrorist groups using its own air transport. And 100 years later, why is Turkey in the South Caucasus? It is our assessment that Turkey has come to the South Caucasus to continue the policy of genocide of Armenian people.
Official Ankara declares that Armenia and the separatists of Nagorno-Karabakh supported by it violate international law, since the territory of Nagorno-Karabakh rightfully belongs to Azerbaijan.
They have no respect for international law or for humanitarian values, nor they have a view on the matter from a moral point of view. They have ruthlessly attacked Ganja and other civilian settlements and continue to do so. This amounts to the breach of the ceasefire, a blow to stability and negotiations. They continue to do so in a very reckless manner. The day will come when they will account before history and international law.
Civilians suffer as a result of hostilities. Baku says about 42 casualties among the population. There are 10 children among the wounded, and the UN is concerned with the situation.
We also stress that we call on all parties again to fulfill their agreements to a humanitarian ceasefire and other commitments announced in Moscow. We also share the High Commissioner's for Human Rights' alarm at the suffering of civilians.
The International Committee of the Red Cross called on Armenia and Azerbaijan to prepare for the exchange of detainees and bodies as a result of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict.
The International Committee of the Red Cross remains ready to facilitate the handover of bodies of those killed in action or the release of detainees. The sides, however, need to agree on a format between themselves.
According to the Prosecutor General's Office of Azerbaijan, during the aggravation of the conflict, 1,165 houses, 57 apartment buildings and 146 civilian infrastructure objects were destroyed. Reported by Vadim Kramer, Roman Smolar, UATV News.
The military who visited hotspots or who lost their comrades in battle very often suffer from post-traumatic disorder. From now on, it is possible to identify these and other neurological disorders in the early stages by examining one's eyes. This discovery was made by Ukrainian scientists from the Filatov Institute of Eye Diseases and Tissue Therapy in Odessa. Our correspondent found out more about a secret of a revolutionary diagnostic method.
Leonid is a career officer. In 2015, after mobilization, he went to fight in Donbass. He passed several rotations. Now he's a patient of the military hospital's psychiatry clinic.
After the last rotation, the disorder started progressing. Because I always see these guys, well, often in my dreams.
The test showed that Leonid has post-traumatic stress disorder. However, people can hide anxiety conditions, psychiatrists say. And eye examination can recognize them. Such a discovery was made by Ukrainian oculists, who used an eye tracker to record a person's response to visual, auditory, or olfactory stimuli.
With a combination of all these factors, or with one of these factors, eye movements may begin that the person cannot control, but the researcher sees them. These are very slight eye movements. We don't see them, we don't control them. They are visible only when using certain equipment.
Oculists work with the main military hospital. This method revealed almost 3,000 servicemen with post-traumatic stress disorder.
We began to identify the servicemen who also came to the rotation but had no complaints. There were no changes in psychological tests, but the eye tracker showed the contrary.
Odessa scientists began to diagnose mental disorders using an eye tracker yet in 2012 and published research data in scientific journals. In 2019, the discovery was patented in Ukraine. Reported by Vadim Kramer and Inessa Zanina, UATV News.
Art objects reflecting the effects of the armed conflicts were presented in the capital. Artists and young people from Ukraine and Russia have prepared more than 40 works. Earlier, the project participants discussed the situation in Donbass and the negative consequences of war in general. After long discussions, they transfer their pain and experience associated with military conflicts to art objects. There are works that were created by guys from Ukraine and Russia together, and they did not have any confusion. The first contact, of course, was difficult when they realized that everyone sees the story differently. It was important for them to talk about it, and then they realized that there is something uniting them. This is pain, a feeling of an enemy, something one wants to remove. Hence, they started to create many works together. This is a dialogue about the ongoing war. This is a dialogue between Ukrainians and Russians. This is something that rarely happens for obvious reasons. But this dialogue is very necessary because we also feel our responsibility to spread objective information, both in Russia and in Russian society. This is a fight against manipulation and propaganda. Toys are wearing face masks, all because they have appeared during a pandemic. The artist from Odessa says she creates doll versions of the heroes of fairy tales and legends from the land of the rising sun. She has been fond of Oriental culture for a long time. People there knew how to value space. Therefore, she makes small figurines. Our correspondent admired the beauty.
Cats, Bats and Dragons. The workshop of Anna Diakonova-Krivlenko from Odessa is full of fantastic creatures. She uses glass, fur and ceramics to create toys. The peculiarity of each one is that all parts are movable.
This is a small albino bat. It appeared during my quarantine. I wanted something soft, white and fluffy. You see, it is quite mobile. Legs move on a special mount. As it has appeared during quarantine, it has a special little mask.
The woman has been fond of creating toys since childhood. She says the images came to mind themselves. Later, she noticed their similarity with the heroes of Japanese myths. And after participating in the exhibition, her hobby turned into a profession. Now her works are popular all over the world. Even Japanese order masterclasses.
I cannot tell that it is my full source of inspiration. However, I like it a lot. In Japan, houses are not large enough, and they are very careful with their space. They try not to litter it. A large toy needs to be placed somewhere, and such a small one can be placed near a computer, for instance. They really love such small ones.
Anna does not do her work for orders. She says it is difficult to implement other people's ideas, and therefore customers are encouraged to choose from the already completed unique toys. Reported by Vadim Kramer, UATV News.
That was our final story this hour. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned. More updates on our official website, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter pages.